Location: Chiang Rai Province, Northern Thailand Time. Friday, July 21st, 2023. 11:36 p.m. The scream tore through the night, sharp and piercing, cutting through the hum of cicadas and the soft patter of rain on banana leaves. Maya froze mid-step on the muddy path leading to the sanctuary, her heart pounding like a drum. A moment later, the sanctuary's alarm bell began to clang, its metallic echo ricocheting off the surrounding jungle. Without hesitation, she broke into a run, the soles of her bare feet slipping and sliding in the wet earth. Ahead, the massive wooden gate of Nock's enclosure loomed in the flickering glow of lanterns, the frantic shouts of workers reverberating through the thick night air. Maya's chest heaved as she approached, shoving her way through the small crowd gathered near the gate. Inside, the chaos unfolded like a scene from her worst nightmare. Nock, the sanctuary's largest and most majestic elephant, stood near the fence, his massive frame tense, his tusks gleaming menacingly under the lantern light. His ears flapped in agitation, his trunk swaying erratically as he let out a deep, guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath them. A young volunteer cowered in the far corner of the enclosure, her arm wrapped in hastily applied gauze, blood seeping through the fabric. Her tear-streaked face was pale, her body trembling as another worker knelt beside her. Maya's pulse quickened as she scanned the scene. "What happened?" she demanded, grabbing Arun's arm. Arun turned, his usually steady demeanor cracked with unease. "Nock snapped," he said, his voice clipped. "He charged at her, nearly broke the fence trying to get to her. We barely managed to pull her out." Maya's eyes widened in disbelief as she looked back at Nock. This wasn't like him. Nock, who had always been gentle and steady despite his size, now looked like a creature on the edge of fury. His deep rumbles filled the air, and the flickering shadows cast by the lanterns made him appear even more enormous, almost menacing. "He wouldn't do this without a reason," she said, shaking her head. "Reason or not, he's dangerous right now," Arun replied, his tone rising. "We need to figure out what set him off before someone else gets hurt." Ignoring Arun's warning, Maya approached the fence, her steps cautious but deliberate. The weight of everyone's eyes bore down on her, but she couldn't stop herself. "Nock," she called softly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Nock's ears twitched, and his restless movements slowed as his dark, intelligent eyes focused on her. Slowly, Maya extended her hand through the gap in the fence, her breath hitching as Nock's massive trunk reached toward her. The warmth of his rough skin against her palm was both familiar and grounding. She exhaled, relief washing over her as the tension in Nock's posture began to ease. Behind her, Arun's voice cut through the quiet. "Maya, this isn't safe. Step back." But Maya wasn't listening. Her eyes dropped to the ground near the fence, where something glinted in the lantern light. A small, shiny object half buried in the mud. Frowning, she crouched down and brushed the soil away, her heart skipping a beat as she recognized it. It was a silver bracelet, her silver bracelet, the one Daniel had given her for their anniversary years ago. She had thought it was lost forever. "What's this doing here?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. Arun moved closer, his brows furrowed. "What?" Maya held up the bracelet, her fingers trembling. "This is mine. I lost it months ago." Arun's expression darkened as he stared at the bracelet, then at the fence. "Maya, there's more going on here than you're telling me." Before she could respond, the sharp beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness. Her stomach sank as Daniel's voice rang out, sharp and unmistakable. "Maya, what the hell is going on here?" She turned to see him standing at the gate, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. His presence hit her like a jolt, and the delicate balance of her emotions began to crumble. Location: Chiang Rai Province, Northern Thailand Time. Friday, July 21st, 2023. 11:50 p.m. Maya's breath caught as Daniel's silhouette cut an imposing figure against the lantern-lit enclosure. The rain clung to his shirt, highlighting the tension in his shoulders as he moved closer. His flashlight's beam darted between Maya, Knock, and the bloodied volunteer still sitting on the ground nearby. "Maya," he said, his tone sharper now. "What's going on here?" She straightened, clutching the silver bracelet in her palm. "There was an incident," she said, keeping her voice steady. Knock was upset. "I came to calm him." Daniel's jaw tightened, his sharp eyes narrowing on her. "At midnight? During a storm? With a volunteer hurt and the staff scrambling? This isn't you just calming an elephant, Maya. What aren't you telling me?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. She could feel Arun's gaze lingering, and it only made her stomach twist further. The weight of the bracelet in her hand suddenly felt unbearable. "I found this," she said finally, holding it up. "It's my bracelet, Daniel. The one I thought I lost. It was in Knock's enclosure." For a moment, confusion flickered across Daniel's face, but it was quickly replaced by something colder, something calculating. "That doesn't explain why you're out here in the middle of the night," he said. Before Maya could answer, Arun stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "Knock's behavior tonight wasn't random, Daniel. Something set him off." He glanced at Maya, then back at Daniel. "And maybe that something has to do with what's going on behind closed doors." Daniel turned his glare on Arun, his voice low and dangerous. "What exactly are you implying?" Arun didn't flinch. "You've been gone a lot lately, and when you're not here, she is. Maybe if you paid more attention to what's happening in your own sanctuary, you'd have answers." "Enough!" Maya's voice rang out, her frustration boiling over. She turned to Arun, her cheeks flushed with anger. "This isn't your place to stir up accusations." Arun opened his mouth to respond, but Daniel cut him off with a cold laugh. "You're accusing me of being absent?" he said, his voice laced with bitterness. "Funny. Coming from someone who's been emotionally checked out for years." Maya's chest tightened, her defenses crumbling under the weight of his words. "I've been here, Daniel. Every day with the elephants with this sanctuary. You're the one who turned it into a project you can't be bothered to finish." "And what about Knock?" Daniel shot back, pointing toward the massive elephant, who had resumed his slow, restless swaying. "You're so invested in him that you've forgotten the rest of your life. Do you even know what you're running from anymore, Maya?" The question hung in the air like a live wire, buzzing with unspoken truths. The rain began to let up, the storm's fury replaced by an uneasy stillness. "I'm not running," she said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. "But maybe I'm searching for something you stopped giving me a long time ago." Daniel's face hardened, but before he could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the air. All heads snapped toward the enclosure's far corner, where the wooden fence had splintered. Knock let out a low growl, his massive body turning toward the sound. In the shadows, a figure darted along the edge of the enclosure, a man carrying something in his hands. "Who the hell is that?" Daniel hissed, already moving toward the gate. Maya's heart raced as she grabbed his arm. "Wait, you don't know what he's doing?" "I don't care," Daniel snapped, wrenching free. He signaled Arun and a few workers to follow him as they ran toward the figure, the flashlight beams bouncing wildly. Maya stayed frozen, her mind spinning. The bracelet, Knock's distress, the stranger in the shadows. It all felt connected, but the pieces refused to align. She stepped closer to Knock, her hand trembling as she placed it on his side. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered. Knock rumbled softly, his trunk curling toward her as if to reassure her. But in the distance, raised voices cut through the stillness, drawing her attention back to the others. Daniel and the workers had cornered the figure near the perimeter fence. As they shouted, the man dropped whatever he was carrying and raised his hands in surrender. The lanterns cast eerie shadows over his face, revealing a mix of fear and defiance. Maya moved closer, her heart pounding. The man looked vaguely familiar, a local villager, perhaps, or someone who had visited the sanctuary before. Arun grabbed the dropped item, holding it up for everyone to see. It was a small metal canister, dented and streaked with mud. Daniel frowned. What the hell is this? Arun twisted the lid open, recoiling as a sharp, pungent smell hit the air. It's some kind of chemical, he said, his voice grim. This wasn't just a random break-in. Maya's stomach dropped as she looked between the man and the canister. He was trying to harm Nak, she said, the realization hitting her like a punch. The man muttered something in Thai, his words fast and panicked. One of the workers translated, his face pale. He says someone paid him to do it, to agitate the elephants. He doesn't know why. The air seemed to freeze as all eyes turned to Daniel. What? Daniel said, his voice rising. You think I had something to do with this? No one said that, Arun replied, his tone loaded with implication. Maya felt her world tilt, the threads of her life unraveling one by one. The sanctuary, Nak, her marriage. All of it felt like it was balancing on the edge of a knife, ready to collapse under the weight of what they didn't yet understand. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about Nak's behavior or her and Daniel's fractured relationship. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, and the consequences were only beginning to surface. Location: Chiang Rai Province, Northern Thailand time. Saturday, July 22nd, 2023. 12:30 a.m. The storm had passed, leaving the air thick and heavy with the scent of wet earth and frangipani. Maya stood near Nak's enclosure, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The strange man who had broken in was now in the hands of local authorities, and the workers had dispersed, their faces tight with worry. But Daniel hadn't left. He stood a few paces away, his hands shoved into his pockets, staring at the muddy canister Arun had left on the ground. The chemical's sharp odor lingered, a toxic reminder of how close they had come to disaster. You need to tell me what's going on, Maya said finally, her voice trembling but firm. This isn't just about Nak or the sanctuary, is it? Daniel turned to her, his face a mixture of guilt and defiance. You think I have something to do with this? I don't know what to think anymore, Maya admitted. But I know you've been hiding things from me. And I know Nak's not the only one in danger here. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. Fine. You want the truth? I'll tell you. He gestured for her to follow him to the office near the main sanctuary building. Inside, the dim light revealed stacks of papers, invoices, and project plans scattered across the desk. Daniel pulled open a drawer, retrieving a thick folder. This sanctuary, he began, flipping through the folder, was supposed to be a dream, a way to build something meaningful, something sustainable. But dreams cost money, Maya, more than we had. He handed her a document, and her stomach sank as she scanned it. It was a contract, a loan agreement with a name she didn't recognize at the top. Samchai Enterprises. Who are they? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. They're investors, Daniel said, his tone bitter. Or at least that's what I thought. Turns out they're more interested in exploiting the elephants than protecting them. When I refused to let them expand the sanctuary into some luxury attraction, they started putting pressure on me. Threats, demands, and now this. Maya's head spun. You took money from people who wanted to turn this into a circus? I didn't know their full intentions at the time. Daniel snapped. I was desperate, Maya. The costs were piling up, and I thought. He broke off, his voice cracking. Maya stared at him, the weight of his confession settling over her. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel looked away. Because I didn't want you to see me like this. Weak. Failing. For a moment, Maya felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to carry the weight of unspoken fears, to hide behind a facade. But this wasn't just about him anymore. And Linda? She asked suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Does she know? Daniel froze, his silence answering the question. Maya's chest tightened. She's involved, isn't she? Daniel let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders slumping. She introduced me to Samchai. She said they were trustworthy, that they could help. I didn't realize until it was too late that she was using me to get a cut of the deal. Maya felt a surge of anger, a heat that burned through her exhaustion. You brought her into this? After everything we've been through? She's your mother, Maya, Daniel said quietly. I thought she could help. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the faint rustling of the trees outside. Maya turned the contract over in her hands, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. I trusted you, she said, her voice trembling, with this sanctuary, with my life, and you let her poison everything. Daniel stepped closer, his voice pleading. I made mistakes, Maya, but I'm trying to fix them. That's why I've been away so much. Meeting with lawyers, trying to find a way out of this mess. I just didn't know how to tell you. Maya looked at him, her heart aching with a mix of betrayal and longing. You should have told me, she said finally. We could have faced this together. Before Daniel could respond, a loud trumpeting sound erupted from Nock's enclosure, followed by frantic shouts. Maya and Daniel rushed outside to find Nock pacing near the broken section of the fence, his massive body tense. One of the workers ran up, breathless. There's someone else out there, he said. Near the jungle. Maya's pulse quickened as she turned to Daniel. Who else would be out here? Daniel's face darkened. Samchai. Without another word, he grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the jungle, Maya close behind. The dense foliage swallowed them, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing, where a man in a dark suit stood with a phone pressed to his ear. He turned as they approached, a cold smile spreading across his face. Ah, Mr. Parker, he said, his voice smooth and mocking. I was wondering when we'd meet again. Daniel stepped forward, his fists clenched. It's over, Samchai. I'm not letting you take this sanctuary. Samchai chuckled, shaking his head. You really think you have a choice? That loan you signed gives me more power than you realize. Maya felt a surge of anger and stepped forward. You're not taking anything, she said fiercely. Nock isn't a pawn in your game. Samchai's smile faltered, but before he could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps filled the air. A group of villagers appeared, led by Arun, their faces resolute. You're trespassing, Arun said, his voice steady, and we don't take kindly to threats. Outnumbered, Samchai's confidence crumbled. He backed away, muttering under his breath before disappearing into the jungle. As the group made their way back to the sanctuary, Maya felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. Epilogue location: Chiang Rai Province, Northern Thailand time. August 15, 2023, 7 a.m. The sanctuary was quiet in the early morning light. Maya stood by Nock's enclosure, watching as the elephant grazed peacefully. Daniel approached, his steps tentative. I'm leaving, he said, for now, to figure things out. Maya nodded, her heart heavy. I hope you do. As he walked away, Maya placed a hand on Nock's side, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. The sanctuary, like her life, had weathered the storm, and though the future was uncertain, she knew she would face it with strength.